we're ready.
Where is my? Okay, there we are. So I think we're ready. So we will. I think we don't really have an objective with this particular podcast. We just want to see you, hear from you, and have a riff around what's going on with NFTs. And I think Josh is mainly keen. He said to hear how your views have evolved on NFTs. Let me just hide my other apps, and riff a little bit on what Dirk was telling me yesterday, because I find that quite interesting, the whole behind the scenes auction stuff. Mm-hmm. And whether the market is going to come back, and a little bit of anyway, we'll flow. Do you want to introduce, or should I, Josh?
Yo, you go ahead. You know Simon better than me. I like him better than you like him, though.
Okay. We can fight over it. All right. So, hello and welcome to another edition of the Blind Spot podcast. I'm joined as usual by Junseth. Say hello.
Yo. Hello.
And for those who don't know me, I'm Isabella Kaminska. And today we've got a really special show. We've got Simon Denny, the artist, joining us. He is, I think, best known. I mean, I've heard you described as like one of the original digital artists. Does that resonate, Simon? Would you call yourself?
Sure. I mean, I'll take what I can get, but it's I always say that I have made art about stories that technologists tell us about the world. That's what I like to say. And I do things in museums and galleries, but I also do things online and NFTs and crypto art as well.
Simon's behind a whole slew of really fascinating exhibitions. The one that I personally saw was the one at the Serpentine, which must have been that was when? 2015. I was going to say 2016. Pre the end of the world with Brexit and Trump. Interesting.
Yeah.
That was the end of the world?
I feel like there is
no one told me
2016 and then there's post 2016. That's how
that's actually not wrong. That's not
wrong. So it was pre 2016, before the world changed, let's put it politely.
Before narrative changed, right?
Before Brits think the world changed.
Yeah.
But then also you've done some amazing exhibitions in Tasmania, was it?
Yeah, I've done things in Tasmania at this place called the Museum of Old and New Art, which is like a big private foundation. And this guy's in this place, which was founded by this incredible algorithmic gambling kind of entrepreneur, which is a very interesting space. So I've done stuff there. I've done things for the Venice Biennale. I represented New Zealand there. I have done things at MoMA in New York. MoMA PS1, I did a survey show there, and in LA, I did something at the Hammer Museum, and I don't know, various different things. I was just in New Zealand, where I was born, where I opened an exhibition just a couple of weeks ago as well. So always doing exhibition-y things.
Oh, so do you qualify as a New Zealand citizen, or are you?
Oh, yes. I'm a New Zealand citizen, permanent residence in Germany. That's mine.
Have you built a bunker as a piece of your art, Simon?
So many bunkers. It's you trip over them in New Zealand. Yeah, it's very easy to find a bunker in New Zealand. No, I haven't built a bunker, but I did do an exhibition about Peter Thiel and his supposed bunker building in Queenstown, and that was an interesting narrative to work with as well. I did a whole kind of political map of potential influences and stories that Peter was adjacent to, and I made kind of board game interpretations of those, and then Peter actually came and saw it, which was really interesting, and that struck up a little dialogue. So yeah, the bunker narrative is one that a lot of people see New Zealand close to. I also did a big show about Kim.com many years ago, the founder of Mega Upload, who also lives in New Zealand.
And Mega Porn.
These mega.
No one remembers that. No one remembers that.
Yeah, there were so many megas. It was a mega operation, and it still is a mega operation. He's also like.
Is it really?
Yeah, he's like a mega narrative. He's been trying to be extradited by the US for 10 years, and still he's in New Zealand making businesses. So, and making a lot of noise on Twitter. And so I did an exhibition where I visualized all of the list of things that the U.S. courts wanted to confiscate off him at the beginning of the trial. So there was like a list of like 150 items, and yeah, half of them were bank accounts, and then it was like a bunch of cars and a bunch of art, and I kind of tried to pull in dummies for all of those items, so to try and claim that I was showing his personal collection. And I kind of thought of it as the U.S. courts curating his collection. That was kind of what I claimed it was. Yeah,
That's love that.
Pretty cool. Basically, which is a long way of saying that Simon's like a legitimate artist, not just like one of these people at Hyde Park that you see. Although you do occasionally go to the Serpentine, but that's a different park. Part of the park. It's a different park. Anyway. But I think we're going to be talking about NFTs for the I guess majority of this podcast. But before we get to NFTs, what's the art market like these days? It's all gone inflationary, Simon, and I keep hearing that art's an alternative asset. So what's your view on that?
Well, I mean, I should qualify my position I speak from before I make any claims. But like, you know, I'm an artist. I am a tiny little collector, more of NFTs than physical art. So I only know anecdotally from my position how peers are doing, how galleries that I work with are doing, etc. And it's actually very difficult to get data from the primary market because it's kind of it's hard. Yeah, there's not a lot of transparency in the contemporary art sales environment. So a lot goes on vibes, and everybody likes to project very positive vibes. So even if things are going really badly, mostly people say things are going great. So I know what's happening in my own books and my own studio, but there's no blockchain, for example, to read what sold for when, by whom, to whom, you know. And I think that's one of the great contrasts between working, you know, between the kind of normal contemporary art world that I kind of grew up in and the NFT world, is that there's at least a kind of transactional transparency there where you can see volume, and it's very easy to kind of make statistics of how things are going. Whereas in art, you know, you have to rely on what people tell you, you know, because it's all very, very quiet. So peers are doing, it's all going great. Who knows?
I'm a collector. I'm a collector myself.
But just to that's where you went. You went to get a Beanie Baby.
I want to go get my beanie. This one is an acrylic
box. Is that
box.
because of the merge? Is that like an ETH merge reference?
No, this is just a panda. It's a Peking the panda.
Yeah,
you know?
Sure. But have you seen this meme where it's like a black bear, a white bear, they come together? It's ETH1, ETH2, it's the merge.
ETH merge right here. ETH merge.
Yeah, exactly.
Peking the ETH merge panda.
Yeah,
so you are still buying NFTs? Is that what I
am, because I'm you know, there's this joke, right, in NFTs where people say, like, if you're really terrible at investing, that you're in it for the art. And unfortunately, I'm actually in it for the art. So I do still buy NFTs because I'm really interested in what they're doing artistically. You know, they're cheaper than buying other art for me. But yeah, it's possibly as an investment, it's hard to at the moment.
Do you think NFTs have staying power, or are you because I don't.
But right. Josh, you tell Simon your famous, you know, claim to fame regarding NFTs.
Well, NFTs, I'm the but-for inventor, Simon, of NFTs.
Interesting.
Without NFTs,
allegedly some substance to this claim.
Oh, there is. NFTs flow out of my old show, Bitcoin Uncensored, with the rare Pepes.
Oh, well,
so the rare Pepes were a community that was a community of my listeners, basically, and it was the Bitcoin Uncensored ethos that developed this, and then from there, the rest of the NFT world.
But didn't the rare Pepe get appropriated by the Nazis?
No, that's no.
That's another parallel track of like symbolism, but the rare Pepe as a kind of initial NFT kind of foray into the form, right before EFC 721, like that was like the one of on there's various different timelines of how NFT supposedly developed, and on many timelines the the Rare Pepe is one of the first, right? So
it really is. And then before that, I mean, there was Spells of Genesis, but again, that was like Counterparty. So like the reason that they picked Counterparty again was because of the show. So the NFTs originated on Bitcoin, and in large part because we were, because of Bitcoin Uncensored. So without Bitcoin Uncensored, you don't end up with the Rare Pepes, which are the ones that gets Union Square Ventures attention, and without Union Square Ventures attention, you don't have Crypto Kitties. Without Crypto Kitties, you don't have Crypto Punks and everything else. So, so I like to say I'm the but for inventor. But for Bitcoin Uncensored, we wouldn't be in this world.
Is that? You're not technically the Satoshi of.
Well, there's no Satoshi necessarily. It's more of a I'm the ideator. And then other people are the executors, but even the Rare Pepes were a group of like 4 or 5 guys.
Yeah, and CryptoKitties. It's interesting you should mention that, because Cards on the Table, I collaborated on my kind of most recent NFT kind of big foray with this artist Gile Tadowski, who did the drawings of the cats. So we did a collaborative piece which was called .com Seance, which was trying to bring back Web1 companies that had crashed and re-inject them into Web3. And the way we did that was we algorithmically generated some logos based on descriptions of such companies as cashwars.com or funbug.com, things that flamed out in 2001. And then from the kind of AI generated logos, from the text descriptions that the AI spit out, Gile, the CryptoKitties guy, he then chose one and also did like a final finished beautiful piece, and we sold all those as assets as resurrections of those Web1 companies. So we also sold ENS domains along with them. So when you bought an asset, you also then had a subdomain of the ENS domain, and people are then kind of building on top of that as a platform. So there was a project to build Funbug again, but in Web3, for example. And I'm doing a presentation in London, which is like a giant in Soho, where all of those are flying around on screens, actually coming up soon. Isabella, if you're there in October. Yeah. But anyway.
This Crypto Kitty seance is brilliant. I love that idea. And there was a pets.com one, wasn't there? I just love it. I love it. I love the idea of the concept is brilliant, but that's what Simon does. He comes up with really cool concepts. So I like it. I am sort of in and out during October. So because this is what I wanted to ask you, Simon, because I think the Blind Spot is about bridging different sort of communities and helping them, understand a little bit more about areas they don't necessarily understand about. And I think in finance, apart from collectors who, but you've got to made it, you have to have made it already, like to be a collector. But those of us who haven't quite made it, can you explain to us what kind of can you explain to us how does the art season work? Because October is a big is that considered like the start of the season or the end? How does it work?
Well, in London, it very much is, because there's, art fairs have been a focus of art sales and the arts community, where kind of galleries that represent artists will come and show, a booth full of, it's like a trade fair, a booth full of new work, some also secondary work sales, in kind of centralized places. Basel's a big one that happens in June, but in London it's Freeze, and that happens in October. And so there's a big focus on activity in London during October, because that's when a lot of international visitors with the right attention, money, and community come to look at art. And so I think, one can definitely say that. And there's a few moments like that which are kind of regional, and these galleries sort of hop around the world and do these presentations in these cities, and presumably similar people follow them. October's one of those moments, and this is why there's lots happening, including this .com Seance explosion. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, someone we both know was telling me that, in terms of NFT valuations, for example, or art valuations in general, this summer is a really kind of bad period to try and test the water, because there's not as much activity. Therefore, to really get an understanding of the price, you have to wait until October. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, that could be the case. You know, again, like I have to qualify my claims from the perspective of somebody who's not primarily interested in collecting, but more interested in making and kind of curating and bringing meaning together. But yeah, that sounds plausible, and it follows this rhythm as well. I mean, September, generally the summer is off. You know, July, August. People who are interested in these things are in other places doing other things. And September in New York comes back with like a slew of new shows, and October in London, I think, is one of those things. So it makes sense that the market will follow that.
So is the freeze this year going to be? I mean, you're not probably the person to ask. We should ask someone else. But I guess NFTs are now a big part of that. So I heard that like last freeze already had an NFT presence, but this year it's probably going to be significantly bigger. So NFTs are now part of the fabric.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, I know a little bit more about Art Basel, which is like the European fair, which is a similar stature, right, let's say, to Freeze, and they do a very prominent fair in the US as well, in Miami, in the beginning of December. And there was a really significant presence of NFT action and crypto action, particularly in Miami, because of the crossover with the community in Miami, which is very crypto friendly. Where you had Art Basel, you had a Tezos presence in Art Basel officially, but then you had like 1,000 other events around the same time as the fair in the city, which was very, very visible. And I think that will happen again this year, obviously with a slightly more bearish market at the moment. Who knows what happens by the end of November, beginning of December, but you'd imagine that would be a little bit less in volume. But I think it's sort of started something where people kind of who are into NFTs also go to Basel, which is one way in the community of saying you're heading down to Miami at the beginning of December to go to NFT events, which don't even necessarily touch the main Art Basel fair, which is also a really interesting thing.
Yeah. Although last year I mean, I would say Art Basel was replete with Bored Ape Yacht Club last year. Just filled with it. Yeah,
but the fair itself not, right? That's the crazy thing.
Like
the walled garden of the fair, where you have to pay, you know, whatever it is, $50K to have a booth, and you have to apply with a program, like that was the normal fair bar. This kind of like one Tezos presentation, but then all sorts of collateral events that were not actually officially associated with it were Bored Apes to hell. Yeah.
Are you down here for Art Basel, Simon?
I will be coming, and I'll be doing a presentation also at Art Basel, and also it'll have an NFT tie-in. So,
Isabel, I will go see that on your behalf. I won't say hi to Simon though, because I don't like him.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. It's mutual.
Well, you're very busy then, because you have to do that boating story as well. So
when I met with them, they're good. That'll be a great story. I think we're gonna have some fun with that. We met
I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but I'm going to say anyway. I was commissioned to do a piece for Boat International. It'll be coming out in October, because they were interested to see like what's happening with super yachts and NFTs, and so I did a big sort of thing, and I spoke to one of the first yacht brokers who's dealing in amongst other things these yacht NFTs, which to me
is this after the three arrows boat fiasco? Is this connected to that?
No. This is connected with a real yacht broker who I went there and I kind of checked it out. I sniffed what was going on. So what's going on is it's a yacht broker. It's one of the biggest yacht brokers in the world. The guy who owns it lives right down the road from me. And I guess he used to own it because they said they were just bought out. But one of the side projects that he's doing is with this kid down here. He's launching these Web3 NFT yachts that you can buy. And the story is that they weren't selling because, you know, they're fake yachts. and then the Bored Ape Yacht Club guys found out about it in their chat and then went ape wild buying tons of them. And so now they're actually a thing. But that presents a problem because they aren't really a thing. So now they have to actually like build the thing.
Oh, that's so interesting. Because I mean, you know about this 3AC narrative. So 3 Arrows Capital, one of the biggest stories in crypto in the last 6 months, and maybe a harbinger of the crash, right? Maybe they caused the crash. You know, there's all the speculation, right? But they were one of the core narratives around them was that they had purchased a very expensive luxury boat and had paid off 80% of that. and then they have kind of like, they had to kind of they didn't finish it, and now it's on the market moored somewhere. And it's sort of a symbolic thing for the crash as well. Yeah.
The important thing to note is that 20% of one of the world's biggest yachts is more money than almost anyone still has. Sam, can we talk about your art?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, love to talk about it.
I want to know why you're freaking obsessed with Ethereum. What's going on there?
Well, it's obviously the most decentralized blockchain out there, after Bitcoin, obviously. But no, I mean, that's a very good question, but it's a simple answer, because I'm interested in stories. I'm interested in ways that the world gets explained by technologists. And when kind of Bitcoin came along, I was fascinated by stories that accompanied people that were enthusiastic about Bitcoin. And political stories, community stories, financial stories, and then I think Ethereum presented like a major one in terms of a new operating system to have a decentralized planet, and something you could build post post nation state infrastructure on, with its own money system. Like all of these stories I was really compelled by, and Ethereum was the most visible one when I started making out about it, 2015, 16. And they also had the kind of, in some ways, the biggest claims. And the other reason is because I'm in Berlin, and Berlin has the Ethereum Foundation here. So you meet people who are involved in the project quite frequently. And I think Vitalik is a very interesting, again, in terms of storytellers, I think he's a very interesting figure in terms of like he's not the leader of the pack, obviously. He's a co-founder of something which is, relatively decentralized, so he has no power as such, but the power that he has is somehow rhetorical power through Twitter. So all of those reasons make it very interesting for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I actually I remember when Ethereum was announced, I was in Miami in the room with Vitalik announcing it. So like I've been there, and before that, like I knew about the group working on it and such. So it is an interesting story if that's what you're into. But
I very much remember when that page, when with the ticking time, like the countdown for like when they'd pre-mined it and you had to buy it, and I was like, that's never gonna work. A bit like when I went to university with Coldplay, and where I'd go to their shows, and I'd be, I'm never gonna make it.
So you're
don't listen to me.
It's different, Isabella. Like you might have made a lot of money, but the fact that the merge is happening, the merge is a reset. So it is an admission that it did not work. So you were right.
Do you think that's what it is?
Yeah.
I mean, why is moving from proof of work
interesting
to proof of stake?
Theory? Tell us.
Yeah, exactly. Why is moving from proof of stake a proof that it failed? Why is it not an evolution of the network?
Well, it's essentially like they're taking a snapshot of the network and they're moving forward with it. So like it is not, there's a lot of problems with this. Number one, the way that the vote was done. So they generally in Bitcoin, one of the things that they really try to do is do everything in like a very decentralized way. With Ethereum, they had people stake ETH to vote on whether they were going to merge. They didn't have enough staked ETH. So then all of a sudden, one day, one person, probably the foundation, or very possibly the foundation, staked enough ETH to make sure that the merge was going to happen. So like it wasn't in any way a decentralized vote. There wasn't it's very much a foundation directed motion. It's very, Vitalik has pushed it. A number of people have really like it's just not in any way what Bitcoin is. It's very different. And I think,
couldn't you make claims about like the way that developers have influence and big holders and big miners have influence over like the network in Bitcoin? And it's a different thing, but presumably one could make a claim that if you have a huge investment in a mining rig, or you're a core developer in the Bitcoin system, you also have far more influence over the direction of the project than like just a small holder, for example.
Yeah, so you could try to make that claim. There's a lot of reasons why it's not true. So and here's the thing. Like, there's a lot of good examples. So, for example, in Bitcoin, and I not that we're like a Bitcoin pitch show, so I guess, but I do find this stuff interesting. So, Bitcoin, for example, a few years ago, there was this proposal. This is why we end up with Craig Wright, right? We had this proposal to increase the block size, and the community was not having it. And the corporations in Bitcoin, the big holders, really wanted it, and the miners really wanted it too, because they would make more money. The holders wouldn't have it. So what we had was this thing called, Josh is a Bitcoin maxi. Actually, I am the first Bitcoin maxi, Isabella.
Genre defining position there.
And well, Vitalik wrote that article about Bitcoin maximalism after having an argument with me and Chris on like in Skype. And so like so this is where the word actually comes from. But so what happened is as that happened, as the big holders were pushing for a greater sized blockchain, there was kind of this fight between the general holders, the node operators, and everybody else. And we had UASF, which was the node operators, basically saying they were going to force a chain split if the rest of the network didn't go a certain way. So like it was literally a vote without a vote. There was no community vote. There was nothing proposed. It was just literally the node operators signaled that they were going to refuse to allow a certain type of upgrade. And so what ended up was a very pragmatic sort of negotiated solution between the entire community, wherein we sort of hacked a solution together that would increase the block size if you constructed transactions in a certain way by fixing transaction malleability and adding in segregated witness without having to require a hard fork. So that's your answer. There's actually a lot the merge is fake news. I guess I'm not supposed to read the chyrons, but they're about me. So that's why I would say that Bitcoin and ETH are very different in that way.
I'm just going back to my CNBC producer days, but interesting.
Well, it's CNBC. The producers or the guy on screen sitting there like reading the chyrons at the bottom. He's like, "Oh, that's quite the chiron." We've misspelled that there. Okay. Yeah. Anyhow, but I think it's interesting for me, Simon, when I look at your work, because like your work has been very ETH focused. And on like the other side, we have in Bitcoin, we have like people like Crypto Graffiti who make, very specifically Bitcoin art. And I always appreciated your art. Like I enjoyed the Crypto Kitty Miner. I thought that was very fucking clever.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're demonetized.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. I mean, yeah, the other reason why I think I'm interested in ETH is because actually, to come back to maybe the core prompt for this conversation, it has the biggest NFT community on it, and also the most variety in NFT, and I can say like most NFT art that I'm interested in uses ETH as a chain. So I guess that's another reason why I've been rather ETH focused in my cultural attention.
Well, I do think it's the level of artists that have released NFTs has been kind of amazing to me. Like, just I don't know. I mean, who's the biggest one? The shark dude, the frozen shark dude.
Oh, Jamie Hurst. Yeah, I actually thought the
Alan Hurst.
Good. Yeah, I thought that was
Hurst did it.
Yeah, that wasn't ETH.
So. I mean, if we're talking about the history,
the shark guy.
Because obviously I think regardless of like the heritage of who made the first whatever, but isn't like Beeple fundamentally the key thing that created or at least brought art normies into the world of NFTs? I mean,
I think it's worth making that distinction because it was a huge financial signal to the art world that this was to be taken seriously, right? And it was in collusion with the auction houses to some degree. Who knows what really happened? Maybe you got that story from people who are closer to the auction houses themselves. But
I learned about this concept of committed bids or like unrevocable bids in the auction, which I thought was fascinating in its own right. But we'll have hopefully we'll have a dedicated podcast with the person who knows all about this soon. But so this idea of irrevocable bids it comes out of the heritage of the 2008 crisis, when the auction houses were giving guarantees to a lot of like artists at auction, which were being essentially backstopped by the banking industry. And then when 2008 happened, they found themselves in a massive problem, having over, or as Tom Cruise might say, having written checks their bodies. What's the phrase? Top Gun phrase?
Writing checks their bodies.
Yes, that's the one. And then there was like a period of no one was giving guarantees, and then essentially they came out with this new system of third-party guarantees, which was they essentially, all the kind of things that you suspect are going on at auctions are still going on at auctions, but then they just make it transparent, and they say that, you know, there's a irrevocable bid from X, Y, or Z who's going to underpin the auction. Basically, that's how I understood it.
However, Isabella, I will say I'm going to assert, hot take, I don't think that NFTs have ever entered normie space, at least not yet.
Well, there's certainly a lot more normified after that big financial signal. I think that made a splashes a bunch of papers. I got questions that I never had before, because I will say that I have been adjacent to art production about blockchains and using blockchains as a medium, a long time before the Beeple signal, and a long time before people started producing things. Again, like, first is not necessarily the most important thing, and it's not how. It's not who wore it first, it's who wore it best often in history or whatever. But there was a really interesting dedicated community of artists like playing around with blockchains and what it meant to make things using the NFT kind of standards, but also doing other things like using other types of blockchain arrangements. So, for example, there was a group around 2017-18 called Terra Zero, who were experimenting with an art project where you had a proposition to have forests own themselves and use smart contracts to legally make a forest a legal entity that could own itself, employ everybody that kept it running as people, but then accrue the value to the title of the forest itself. And these types of things, using blockchain infrastructure to make artwork that otherwise couldn't happen in another space, but is kind of nothing to do with what happened in a Beeple signal moment. And there was a community that was consuming that, critiquing it, but the liquidity was low. And then I think running up until the Beeple moment and after DeFi, that's the story I was always told, right? DeFi and stablecoins made liquidity in the space, especially in the Ethereum space, like a lot more. There was a lot more money going around at a certain period, and then throwing money at assets that was an experiment in kind of making different forms of asset holdings was then, became something that was a bit of a meme in the space. And then the Beeple signal kind of like beamed that even further, and artists and collectors kind of came a different way.
I think that's true, but I guess my point is that it seems to me that the art market has discovered that there's a large liquidity pool in crypto, and not so much that traditional art collectors like Steve Martin or something like that are suddenly buying NFTs. So that's
true. Yeah, at the moment, they're still very separate worlds. Also, I know that from selling my own thing. So I'll make an NFT project like .com Seance. 400 plus people or 400 plus wallets hold those NFTs, right? And I think of the kind of art world collector, there's probably maybe 50 of those of them, or 20 even, like a very small percentage. And they're not particularly attuned to those launches and those signals. I have a mascot to answer that mascot, actually.
This is a Damien Hirst panda.
This is a pets.com Beanie Baby. So that's wait.
You gotta put it right.
There you go. That's amazing.
Yeah, but this is a Damien Hirst panda, Simon.
Yeah, but this is a Simon Denny, like Beanie Baby. So.
Wait. When you say it's a Damien Hirst, is it actually a Damien Hirst, or are you just being ironic?
Have you seen the Sharks?
No, I don't know about the Sharks.
Oh, the Sharks matter. You'll get it. Go look at the Damien Hirst Sharks.
Oh, is that
the thing that Damien Hirst got known for?
In formaldehyde, those ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Oh, I see. So it's a joke, but that is a legitimate pets.com Beanie Baby that was commissioned for your project.
No, that's just one.
That's a real thing.
Oh, that's actually that's like a collectible.
It's real merch. Yeah,
I don't know that it's collectible, but it's certainly real.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And he's holding this amazing little pets.com mic, which I could also
use. I see that. That will never be remembered. But I guess you know what?
I'm very
honestly,
stressed at how quickly you two were able to like find mascots within your like reach. Like I would have to go and dig around for a little bit.
I've got a number of things. This is my
your
studio.
house. Your house is bigger. You have more space to store it. Me, it's like right over there, like next to my bed in my studio.
But but the pet store. So the beanies. So just that one that you have, Josh. How much does that cost?
This one here.
Yeah. How much did you buy it for?
In this mint condition.
Yeah.
As I look at it, it's made by Tie.com back in the 90s. This is a beautiful example of a Beanie Baby that people would want.
It's not the beautiful channel.
This beautiful Peking panda named Peking would sell for somewhere between maybe $400 and $600 on a good day if it went to auction. Cheap is right. That's why I collect beanies.
Yeah.
And what's the sort of appreciation like? What's the best appreciation of a Beanie Baby?
They don't appreciate. They just go down. That's why I buy them now. Although, Simon, we should encase one of these in acrylic and make a joke about.
Well, I'm just saying, there's definitely something happening here between Beanie Babies and mypets.com beanies. I think there's a conversation there to be had.
Well, but let's talk about the market as it is now, because the reality is, like, my crypto skeptic audience would point out, is that there has been a massive crash. A lot of people invested in it. A lot of young, naive people who thought the market only went up invested. Presumably, regulators are sniffing around. Do you perceive that? What's your perception as someone who's been watching this market for a while? Is there concern that it's going to get overregulated? Is there how do you justify talking up this market when so many people have been hurt?
Is that a question to me?
Yeah. Josh is already anti NFT. So
I'm not anti NFT. I am not anti NFT. I don't want that out there.
Maybe I should just qualify again, like where I come from and my interest, right? I think it's a very interesting new design space for artists to do interesting kind of like shared ownership projects that also play around with the idea of value, right? So I think that as a design space for conceptually focused artists is a very new and very interesting thing. And I am a fan of projects that like push the design possibilities of that space, right? And it makes it more interesting and more real. The fact that there has this kind of speculative asset part of it, which is also always part of any art market, whether you like it or not. Paintings certainly in the modern period have always been objects of speculation and continue to hold a lot of value and behave a little bit like stocks, etc. And so I think that it's a natural extension of that type of mechanism, which is so prevalent in like the art world anyway. So this is why I'm interested in it. This is what I claim to be interesting. And all of the things that are dangerous about that are also dangerous of just about being an artist in general. It's a very volatile market. You can be hot one day and worth nothing the next day. It's a really crazy space. And sort of in some ways at the kind of blazing edges of capitalism or something like that. And I think that's also what makes it like culturally compelling to be a part of and look at it from. So I acknowledge all of those problems that you mentioned, and I acknowledge the fact that there's like really awful stories that happen in the crypto space about people who are naive, losing a lot of money, but also time and all these things and becoming kind of unstable. Unfortunately, it's also a very common thing in the arts in general. So that would be my relation.
Because isn't it the case that the whole boom in like NFTs and art has kind of coincided with a lot more regulation in the art dealer space? So like I think 2021 was the year KYC and AML came in to the market, at least in Europe. I don't know about the rest of the world, but in the UK, as far as I know, because up until then it was a fairly kind of discretionary situation, right? Whereas now there's actual oversight from a regulatory standpoint. Is that coincidental?
I mean, I think Yes and no, and I also would qualify that. I think that probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that probably applies a great deal more to the secondary market than it does to the primary market. And like as an artist, I'm mostly interacting with the primary market, right? I have a secondary career, which is smaller than many, but like it's and it's something that one interacts with eventually as an artist, but primary sales are also still pretty cowboy, I would say, in a lot of cases, and there are ways to avoid some of those scrutinies in various different jurisdictions, which is one of the reasons why some of the biggest art fairs, for example, are in Switzerland. So it's and Hong Kong, etc., because there are also free ports that hold the assets in those international zones where taxes are, as you know, more flexible and these other things from the financial industry. So yes, there might be a correlation between KYC in the secondary market and kind of regulation happening and a move to crypto, but I don't know. That my feeling is maybe coinciding with what Josh implied before, is that I think that the audience generally and the kind of main money behind investing in NFTs as artwork is not really migrating from the art world proper. It's more coming from people who are liquid in crypto, adventurous, and have money to spend and pass around on risky fun things.
And I think that goes along with my actual position on NFTs, which is NFTs are collectibles and invest ironically.
Right.
Only ironically. If you're very serious about this and you're throwing in like your dinner money, then I get the Schadenfreude vibes. I kind of just like enjoy watching that crash. It's very funny to me.
Well,
or another value proposition for you both, which is maybe less monetary, but all go to things that you think are innovative and interesting, which are cheap, which is actually in the NFT space like really possible. Like some of the most interesting work in terms of pushing the design limits and kind of creating interesting cultural shutters across ways of making art are happening in places where things are really, really cheap, and certainly cheap compared to where that type of activity happens in the normal contemporary art world, right? So my NFT collection, whatever it is, I say has a lot of masterpieces in it from, early experiments in really interesting things that at the moment don't have that much financial value, and they may never have that much financial value. But it's a vital place of culture happening now that I can participate in a really exciting way, which I can't do with a lot of even like young art straight out of art school, because it already goes to quite a high price pretty quickly.
It's kind of remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a generational clash here for sure. And so my position on NFTs is actually quite nuanced as well, because, I as I've said, many times now, I've made a concession versus my very hypercritical position on Bitcoin. Like, I do think there is, I have finally kind of seen the light in terms of like what problem it solves. And I think the decentralization side of it is really very important, the censorship resistant side of it, but I'm still very critical of all the kind of scamming stuff. I kind of think it's kind of a function of the human condition, and that it's not necessarily the fault of the technology is neutral, and it's just human nature that does this. But with NFTs, I am inclined to be a bit open-minded, because I see it as a generational shift, but also because there's a clear value in digital art. So when you see when my daughter does a picture on her iPad, that means something to me. That's like, she drew a Smurf. That's good. I really like it. Like, that is a legitimate form of expression in digital media, which otherwise gets vaporized. Is it any more or less meaningful than, say, hanging a picture on the wall? Well, for me, I see the value in that. Now, the fact that the NFT then just attaches a mechanism by which you can express value for a digital piece of art there are many problems in it, and I think the legal situation hasn't caught up with the technology, and there are definitely ways around it. And I'm not convinced the technology is infallible, and I'm very cynical and skeptical of some of the stuff I'm told about it. But there's definitely something in it, and I think in the future, when you see these kids, I'm not a gamer, I don't game, but when you look at the value they attribute to, like, mummy, please, I need that digital like Barbie thing in my iPad. the in-app economy or whatever, there is a value to it, and there is a differentiation in the aesthetics that are being swapped. And
Isabella, though, is it possible? And this is to Simon too. Like, I think a lot about this, a lot. And my issue with the NFT market is that there is no connection between the receipt you get on blockchain and the art itself, right?
Well,
so
that depends
I don't.
On the design. So, right, like I mean, what about on-chain NFTs? Let's say, you know,
Yeah,
so you're saying
yeah, they do have
like NFT, which is just a link to a Web2 URL that is then you can swap it, change it out. I think you made a piece that points out that problem.
That was Beeple, right? Beeple was that. You're correct, though. There are on-chain NFTs, but like generally those are like
many of them. And it's an interesting
random
design space. And as things like the merge happen and as potential capacity grows, then you can do that.
Oh no, you won't.
Wait. I'm here to like be ignorant, and ask ignorant questions. What is an on-chain NFT?
They're NFTs that actually exist on the blockchain. So NFTs don't exist on the blockchain. The receipt does, right?
So when I think I have a simpler explanation, right?
Sure.
Like, so because I answer this question quite a lot. So it's like the blockchain is a ledger, right? It's a spreadsheet, and a certain number of key characters fit in the chain that actually goes in the real blockchain that is the real ledger. And other things are pointed to from that position, right? Like you have a web link inside that chain of code that points somewhere off the blockchain. And what Josh is saying is like the majority of NFTs are JPEGs that sit outside on some normal server or even decentralized servers like IPFS that are not actually written into the chain that's on the code. And so therefore, when you buy the thing, it's more the receipt that you're buying that points to the actual object rather than the actual artwork itself, right? But then there's a whole design space that uses that tiny little bit that you can actually put in the ledger entry as the design space for the NFT. And there are ways to kind of design for that and augment that in really interesting ways. And as blockchains grow, maybe as proof of stake and the merge happens as well, that design space might become larger. And there might be all sorts of other things. But right now, there's a huge variety of things that are really just made inside the medium on chain, which can claim to be more valuable. I will challenge that again because I actually think that a receipt that points to something and that whole ecosystem is still valid and still interesting. And I like lots of things that are not on chain as artwork that have other things that NFTs can only do, which is, for example, have a community of people all tied into one asset.
Well, so this is where I was going, Simon. Like, and even the on-chain stuff. The reason the on-chain stuff is fairly uninteresting to me is because it's purported ownership, right? Like, it's like I own this thing. It's like, okay, right click save. Now I own it too. Well, yours isn't on chain. Yours is on your computer. Like, okay, so, but like the reality is, as I see it, we have these incredibly trusted organizations like Christie's and Sotheby's and such that could literally put together their own blockchain / database that does this with digital art and basically shows you who owns, like, what is the provenance of like a digital piece, so that people could continue to bid on these things. And I would find that far more legitimate than this sort of blockchain ownership type.
So you want a gatekeeper? You want a gatekeeper keeping quality?
I think it only makes sense with the gatekeeper. I don't care about the quality part of it. I think that they could do it with no quality. They could call it the Sotheby's blockchain. But I think that the art market only makes sense with a gatekeeper, because like then the blockchain part.
Doesn't everything you're saying apply to money and banks? Are you not just like, aren't you undermining your argument again, like for Bitcoin, by saying that?
No, because the arguments for money and art are very different. Like, I don't think you can make Beanie Babies in a decentralized way. I think those require Ty Warner. Not everything can be decentralized. It's this like buzzword that we use for everything. And I'm not sure that I necessarily want there to be a gatekeeper. But what I do think is that, to me, that is more interesting than this sort of notional like receipt that someone's picked a pointer to, like a JPEG that relates to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can push back on that a little, in that, like, I don't think Sotheby's is incentivized to build that space, right? And I don't think Sotheby's or Christie's is incentivized to build the design space that is something like Ethereum. And therefore, the type of art that I think is really valuable culturally and is in some cases valuable also financially now at least, that has emerged through that kind of system where there isn't a gatekeeper, where it's come from a particular type of community, where access is slightly different than entering into the art market through art schools and these types of things. I think all of that stuff that's happened is really amazing and interesting. And Sotheby's or Christie's could have never built the design space that would have prompted that, right? So I think just in terms of the different types of culture and people, not people at the top of the chain of everything, always saying what's valuable and what isn't, that often come from a similar background, that often come from a similar school system, that often all know each other. Like if that's, I think that one of the cool things about NFTs is it's opened up the possibility of claiming, making art and playing with value and playing with community in this other way that would have never come from the center of the art world that I know.
That is it is interesting too. This is something that I mean, maybe this undermines my point, Isabella. I've realized one thing that is sort of interesting, which is that the art market is a bit uncontrolled, which I guess is what you want in art. And Sotheby's and Christie's, they really are responding to the artists and the art market. Like when this NFT thing started, I emailed, I think it was someone at Christie's, I believe, or maybe it was Sotheby's. I think it was Christie's. And I tried to get them to sell one of the original rare Pepes. I showed them the picture of it, and the email I got back was like, no.
Yeah, but there's a high amount of core value to that has already existed that they just couldn't see. Right. And then
a few months later, they were like, "We may be selling a rare Pepe," and I'm just like, "Oh yeah." Exactly. By the way, the funny thing about that, the person who tweeted it was the person that I originally offered mine to.
There you go. But they're responsive, right? They're reactive to value that's been created somewhere else. They just kind of capitalize on all the production that happened around that cultural value. And I would argue that rare Pepes are a very special thing, which should be valuable because it reflects a particular moment in time and a particular emergent set of concerns, values, aesthetics, all of these things which art does really well, And the fact that they're reactive and they follow that, and there was already a value in the community before there was a value in an auction house, is exactly what happens in the normal art market as well. A little group of people working somewhere will create something really interesting, exciting, and first it'll be valuable to their friends, and then it'll be valuable to some business people who also want to market it and grow it and make it a bit more scale, a bit more reach, and then eventually the secondary market comes in, and there's a whole other tier of markets on only the uber rich can participate in. So
yeah,
I think
that is the story of the Beanie Baby. I mean, that's a story of all collectibles, and I do think that it's interesting because most collectibles are transient and temporal. And art and tennis shoes and stuff have seemed to kind of transcend, like buck that trend a little bit, where they're not as temporal and transient. They've been popular for 30 years or 40 years. I mean, I guess art is somewhat newly very expensive, but has always been very popular.
Very expensive. Old art. Oh look, there's the matchbook collection. Old art is, older art has been valuable and expensive to produce, to maintain, to pass on for a long time.
Oh yes.
Lots of different spheres. So I think the value of cultural objects and that are seen to be resonant with something that's really important. There's always been some kind of quote market there. If you want to frame it, I love the Burger King ones. That's really
amazing. This is the thing. It's so eye of the beholder. I have this like insane match like load. This is just one. I've got bags of this stuff. My mum used to collect matches at free matches at any restaurant or anywhere she went to. So I've got all the and like from an arts point, like some of them are really interesting, So it is so like, is there a market for a like? Remember when you could smoke on planes? You could smoke on Concorde, and they gave you matches.
Concorde. Oh my God! How many of those do you have? That's so beautiful. Yeah.
I remember, it's interesting with the smoking on planes because, like, Simon, the thing about Bitcoin generally or crypto is we've now had it for 10 years.
Yeah.
And the kids that, when you're 5, let's say, you don't remember anything for, 4 or 5 years. But then, so there are kids today who were born and basically feel like crypto has been around their entire life.
Yeah, sure.
And I mean, yeah, and I think that's a really interesting sort of world to be entering. I think that's something that like a lot of these adults who rejected the benefits of crypto never saw coming because they didn't think it would be here long enough. So we live in a world now where like a majority of, just the majority of people very soon will be in a world where they think Bitcoin or, you know, any of these cryptos that have, you know, Litecoin, whatever, have existed since they were born. And I think that's a really interesting thing.
Super interesting. And it's interesting culturally, right? And this is, again, making that claim for cultural space and viewing it through a cultural lens as interesting and obviously connected to like money and politics and all these other things that Bitcoin touches as well.
And if it fails, like it's a touch point in their life. It's an important thing that existed their entire life that they didn't know had a beginning, which is, I think, kind of what's interesting about like the beginning. You really don't understand that certain things have a beginning. So if you were born post-internet, the idea that there was a world before the internet is like me thinking about a world with no cars, you know? And that's really interesting because like if this whole project fails, then we have all of these people who literally don't know that it just got here.
Right.
It's been around long enough for them to not have just gotten here.
Right, and it's naturalized as like as a part of the value environment, a part of the things that express value in the world, which I think is like really interesting culturally.
It is. I mean, it's all it. You know, I like art. I did art for foundation, so for me, this is all very cool. But I think, how do you convince, like, you know, the financial market that this is a serious domain? Because I still, I think a lot of people watching this who come from sort of TradFi are still not sold on the idea. It doesn't matter though.
Maybe that's not my role, right? Like, I guess, you know, like, so I can claim inherent cultural value and call that a value space and say that an object can, or a digital object can hold that, can be a store of that value, and that should have a financial expression. But on that, like, you know, the claim that it can and will forever. I mean, you know, I will always value art. I will always value art that's made in interesting design spaces that reflects the contemporary world. I think that should have financial value, but I guess that's not necessarily enough for your client. What do you think would be a better argument for the value of it, Isabella?
I mean, I just think society needs something to express like aesthetic values that are a function of the human condition at that particular moment in time. I think it's
fundamentally valuable, right?
Yeah, and it's hard to define. That's kind of the whole point. Like, if you're not supposed to be able to answer the question, what is art? Because that's kind of part of the mystery. And but I also think it's also about movements and cultural kind of trends and ideological wars. And I think you know, I found it quite interesting, like bringing it back to like news. You know, apparently ISIS are like behind, like getting into NFTs, and I find that really interesting because I see NFTs as there's a dimension of like online marketing and or advertising to it. It's like an attention economy thing. So for me, I think one of the functions that is underappreciated in the NFT thing is that it's not just about owning the asset. It's about, well, if you are one of these billionaires who wants to push their, like, you know, socioeconomic ideology on the nation, the world, whatever, you bid up like the Bored Ape, right? It's going to encourage copycatting of bored apes. And so suddenly, because they're fetching a big amount of money, like, rather than having to spend like on digital marketing, you create a movement that replicates the aesthetic that you believe, like in the Renaissance or whatever, like you replicate the aesthetic that you have an attached cultural values to. So I could, like, if I'm a Christian, I might like bid up a Bored Saint series instead, right? To try and, like,
Isabella, do you know about the Bored Ape copycats?
Riley's project. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, there's literally it's being litigated right now because everyone is. I mean, this is, again, Rare Pepe living out itself in real life. Rare Pepe had this idea that you had gatekeepers called the you know, they were lab operators who would test the Pepes and figure out if they were legitimate. And if they rejected the Pepe, it was a fake rare Pepe. Even though it was it's just the whole thing was a joke, but also somewhat serious. So they have the fake rares, and now there's an entire project called the fake rare. It's rare as fuck, rare AF project. So Bored Ape followed the same sort of thing where they had the Bored Apes, and now there's a guy who's being sued for basically coming out with his own Bored Apes. Basically,
there's a really interesting. Yeah, there's an interesting other backstory to that, because that actually comes from art. So Ryder Ripps, who's the artist who did this, it's coming from kind of my art tradition, my art world, and he did these Ryder Ripps collection of Bored Apes, where he literally just used the same JPEGs and made a second version of the collection, sold them, which I think is a really important thing too. They had to enter a market, right? So we sold all of them for like 0.1, something like that. And then you had a Ryder Ripps Bored Ape, and they were, every single Bored Ape was doubled, right? And then he also went out there and spoke the message about appropriation art, things, come from art history, gestures that come from Warhol and Duchamp, and, these types of histories of copies as art, the gesture of copying as a cultural form, and also of affirmation as a cultural gesture, etc. And that clashed with the original culture, like the culture of originals that has kind of emerged around NFT. So it's a very interesting insertion and a very art world kind of conceptual art move that has a really amazing play out.
They're fake rares. They're fake rare, which is great. I absolutely loved watching it happen.
I just thought I saw Cindy, I saw all these other, I saw Warhol in that move, right? I saw these other valuable moves that had happened within the canon of contemporary art and conceptual art, which I'm so invested in, played out in this other design space. And I was like, wow, that's really a very clever move from Ryder, and he did it really well, because a lot of people who have no idea of that history engaged in exactly those ideas, which are really interesting and important, and that kind of a position like a Warhol stands for, right? So I think it was a very smart insertion, also financially and now legally, very, very interesting.
Well, also copyright law probably allows for that as well, which I think is excellent.
Copyright fine. It was trademark infringement, not copyright law, that the suit is, which is also an interesting distinction, right? So he's not being sued for using those images and replicating them. He's being sued for potentially posing as and tricking
a Bored Ape
to think that you're the Bored Ape producer.
So it was brand confusion.
Yeah, exactly, and that's apparently easier to sue for than, because you can, I as an artist have taken lots of images, I appropriate all the time. It's of the language of conceptual art. Warhol famously made pictures of portraits of people that from other photographs that already existed, etc. And it's very hard to sue for that, because you can always say that there's great kind of laws that keep a possibility to make collages.
Shepard Fairey and Obama.
Yeah, exactly. All those things, but also they're legally protected in that you can do a parody legally, you can do, you can do satire legally, you can do collage legally. All of these things are possible in terms of copyright of image, but in terms of posing as a brand and getting fraudulent sales based on somebody thinking that you're the real Bored Ape, that's the thing that is easier to sue for, and that's how they're suing them, which is clever on the legal side.
I imagine
that's really interesting.
They'll have to find somebody who is damaged by that or something, I would imagine, but that's interesting.
No, but it is really interesting, because I think the copyright thing is incredibly hard to execute.
Yeah.
And that's where I think when I speak to artists and people pushing NFTs, often, I keep hearing, oh, well, it's they confuse it as copyright protection, and I think there is that misperception in the market. But the trademark idea is very different, and that makes sense to me. But there has to be something that allows for replication of like, copyright has to be a measured concept, because otherwise you can't create. I mean, you have like derivatives that have to be permitted, because at the moment, like, what, for example, like,
Isabella, the thing with the Ryder Ripps thing is that they're not like the commentary is interesting, because the point of it is that these are not derivatives; they're direct, literal copies of the original thing, which is commentary on the fact that the art is the receipt.
Right,
exactly. It's commentary on that, but it also vibes with other conversations around what's an original thing, right? So in the appropriation art discourse, you can't produce the same thing twice, because if I paint a picture 10 years later that is exactly visually a copy of another person in another part of the world who comes from a different social background's picture, that's not the same cultural gesture. So therefore, it's you cannot produce the same thing again and again. And actually those nuances in context, those differences in context, are the really interesting thing, right? So there's so many layers to the project, which I think is really, really interesting. And I think, plug somebody out there in the ape world, I think that they would do so much better to just let him be a part of expanding that universe, because to me that's more Web3, right? It's like, it's saying they've already got a lot of value from that project, and now here's somebody inventing another angle to get a different type of value from it. And that is my vision of what a Web3 art world should look like, you know. And that's what's cool about NFTs. You can get value from owning something, from building a network that creates value, but the parasitic and kind of like responsive projects are added value rather than taking away, you know. And that's what's potentially cool about the design space. Projects like Loot are a great example of that, right? I don't know if you guys know about this NFT. It was a very famous one when it came out midway through last year. So it was just a list of words on a black square that was on chain, actually, and it was describing objects. So it was like a spear, a cape, a booklet, something like that. It was a list of things that one might have in a game, let's say. And then that sold out, that collection sold out very quickly. And then people started to make derivative collections. So they made images of those objects. They made potential games that used those objects. And that spawned this whole other kind of decentralized way of making kind of cultural assets. What started with this prompt. So the original piece is actually a prompt. And I think that's a really amazing design space that only happens in a kind of a Web3 type art world. And that's exactly the thing that a project like Bored Apes should be supporting. You know, it's not a threat. It actually brings more value to their brand, you know, because I would never have bought an ape, but I was really excited to buy a Ryder Rip's Bored Ape because it vibed with my interests, right? And it was another take on the space.
But you were very confused. You thought that they were original Bored Apes, right?
No, I bought them because I knew that one's cooler. It's like going buying Shenzai t-shirts, which are like Coca-Cola but backwards or whatever, you know?
Sorry, Yuma, I was trying to help you. I do think it's interesting because I do see that like there's a lot of discussion that is happening that is sort of exterior to the NFT space. Stuff that I'm interested in. Like I'm very interested in copyright law. I'm very interested in watching lawyers parse through like the Bored Apes terms and conditions and trying to figure out whether the Bored Apes holders actually have copyright or not. Yeah, that's a hot debated topic right now in law. There's a lot of
so beautiful. The legal document. Of the images in it, it's like amazing. You know, I've made art out of documents because I think those things are always so incredibly beautiful. But that one's a really amazing one.
If you if you NFT the document as art,
that's done. That's been done the day after.
You attach a terms and conditions to the document. Which one is the
exactly? You know, and that's what should be occurring, right? This is an amazing conversation which questions value, which widens the community, like all of that. You know, it's a value add beyond.
You can't copyright legal documents, but if you NFT a legal document as art, then is it copyrighted?
I make sculptures out of patents, which is a really a thing that dabbles in this direction as well, right? So I take a patent design and I make a version of that object, and then that's an art object, and then I also make literal collages from the patent itself. So
that's right, yeah. You've done that before. That's true.
Yeah, it's a great space. Yeah.
What do you guys? Because I know you're running. You have to run soon. What do you think of the the music application? Is there an NFT music application, and how does that fit into the conversation?
So there's a lot of music type things, and I mean, one of the problems with streaming is that for primary producers, making new work is not as valuable as it used to be under a streaming model, right? So I can stream a Leonard Cohen album from 50 years ago 100 times, and it's the same revenue for the for the people who own the copyright, for the people who are getting revenue of it, as it would be for a new album, right? So why produce new albums when we can just listen to the Beatles forever and ever, right? So the funding to produce new culture has gone down in the streaming context. So Web3 models are really popular in the emergent space, and the idea that you can, for example, produce an NFT collection that has snippets of sound on it, and you can own part of it, and then make collages using various parts of the NFTs. I've seen that experiment happen. A group called Amnesia Scanner did that. But also the idea that you can kind of, crowdfund things and own parts of future revenue from musical projects is also being experimented in NFTs. So I think it's a really important space for music.
Because what I think would be interesting is like when I do these podcasts, these Leaked Lunch podcasts, and I do them in a restaurant. I mean, it's original content. It's me interviewing someone. But if the restaurant plays any background music, if I was to put it on YouTube, I'd get like some sort of, I wouldn't be able to monetize my content because there would be a copyright claim on it. And that really annoys me because it's like it's part of life. Like when you hear the music out and about, in reality, it's fabric of life. Right. And if there was only a way like that, if we could only strip out the new content from the old content, and so that you don't get penalized for having like absorbed like this pre-existing piece of art into your new thing, right? Do you know what I mean?
Right. Well, here's a Web3 idea, right? Like, what if that was some sort of asset that floated around, and the thing that now identifies that content and asks you to take it down could instead, in an automated way, just take a fee, like a streaming fee would be, just because it's in the background. So it just takes an XYZ low fee. It's in the background. They've heard it. It's pre-approved, and you just pay a tiny little fraction of something, and then you can use it. You know.
So Simon, not really a Web3 idea. YouTube does that. YouTube's been doing that for years.
There you go. Well,
if you,
it's nothing in your use case, though, right? Like it's a less
So Isabella, YouTube often will do this if there's music or if someone else claims, like there's a way, for example, that you can claim copyright on someone else's channel.
Yeah, someone did that to my thing.
They'll say that this video is copyrighted by X. They don't mind you having it there, but now the revenues are going to go to them. So
yeah, but that's different to what Simon's saying. Simon's saying rather than like giving up all the revenue from the advertising to the copyright claim.
I understand. My point is that it's just a degree.
It's an automated tiny usage.
They could literally just say part of the revenues, but like I'm just saying that it already, like that's exactly what YouTube does right now.
Yeah, but the innovation here is being able to like not deprive me and my original content that sits on top of like some tiny smidgen of.
I understand. I'm saying that's not an innovation. That's just a choice. Like it literally is an aesthetic choice that YouTube is making, right? YouTube is choosing to not, like, for example, one of the things that is really problematic in social media is the way in which they manage copyright, because copyright is something that you literally go to court to decide whether you have. And then when you get to court, you decide, like, you have to argue whether your copyright is valid. And then you have to argue whether like someone actually infringed on it in the way, did you in fact do a work for hire? Did you file it correctly? Did this person actually infringe? Problem. Say it again.
It's a problem of the centralization of authority and the dominance of a single platform to just execute whatever rules they prefer.
That is in fact, yeah. So YouTube is in fact, well, I mean but that's still not that they would still have to choose to build in a different authority, like a different authority structure, right? They would still have to choose to.
Yeah,
probably, it's almost certainly a political problem, Simon, because like I think what's going on with YouTube and these other platforms is they're desperately trying to hold on to like certain legal like statuses that they have, and I don't think Web3 necessarily does that. And I think for some reason they have elected themselves the arbiters of like pre-trial motions and such, which is really interesting. Like they allow you to claim copyright, and there's no necessary there's no ability for you to go like, this is derivative, this is whatever, like this is legal for me to do.
But what if we had a new design space where a more decentralized world was being built, where some of these options could be debated and a different narrative could be created, and therefore a different political world could be created? This is the opportunity of something emergent like Web3, right? Where you can say, we need a different world because it behaves like this one. We have different infrastructure, which may or may not be an innovation in this way or that way. But what we do have is a will to behave in a different way, and a different design space that allows for kind of different sorts of governance, right? That's the value proposition that could be built on.
Yeah, I tend to think. I mean, like we'll see in the future, Simon. But I tend to think that most cultural values or most values and desires either revert back to where they were or the mean, and that most of those types of things are enforced culturally. So, like, I think you need a culture shift. Oh, very important. I think art's very important.
And there's a lot of value in art.
I do think there's a huge amount of value in art, and I think art, like Isabella asked what art is. I tend to say to people that art is commentary. I think that it's extremely important, but I just think that the idea, I think art opens people's minds and gives them like the ability to see new possibilities. I don't know if I would say what it does is innovate, right? I don't necessarily think that there's generally innovation so much in art, apart from like it innovating art itself, which I think is in itself valuable.
But can you not have visual and narrative and community innovation? And I think all of
sure, absolutely. And then it always goes to like what is art? Is invention art? What is art?
Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
Well,
we don't call his flying machines art, right? We call them inventions.
Like those beautiful manuscripts where that was kind of it was Leonardo da Vinci encapsulated everything.
I'm with you. I think that he was
fine with borders being blurred, right? I think it's okay to have something that's almost art, kind of art, has things that resemble art. But I think what is really important is that we have a cultural space to claim value. And I think
I agree with that. I think
it has to go together with finance, because that's how we show care in the world, right? If something's not valuable, it's not cared for. If it doesn't have a price on it, you can't afford to keep it. So I think claiming a space to have financialized value also be tied to cultural assets is important for the world that we live in.
I agree, and what is Stravinsky's Rite of Spring caused people to leave the theater and burn shit, and I think what's I try to put myself sometimes in a headspace that helps me to understand those people, because I've never had that emotion. And it occurs to me that one of the worlds in which artists are dealing with today is one where all art, everything feels like it's been seen, right? Mm-hmm. So you think about like the Mona Lisa. In the world where the Mona Lisa was produced, in order to go see the Mona Lisa, or let's say any Michelangelo work, you had to literally get into a carriage or walk thousands of miles to go see it. And even if someone in a newspaper wanted to produce it, they didn't have the daguerreotype, didn't have anything. They had to literally you'd have like your local artist like draw like their best rendition of the Mona Lisa or something like that. So like you could only like kind of approximate what it might be. And I think that's really interesting that today, like back then, the image of the Mona Lisa, you'd see it, you'd go back, like there's this amazing thing that I've seen, this new like an art that literally like almost perfectly reflects reality. It's amazing. And that would have been something that would have been the experience of a person who saw that when it was made. But today, the experience of every 12-year-old is that they know they could draw the Mona Lisa from memory because they've seen it their entire life in every book. And so I think of that as like a really unique world in which we have not lived for about 50 years. We haven't. Yeah. We don't know what that's like. So I'm waiting. I'm waiting for you, Simon, to produce something that causes people to go burn things.
It has been done. It can be done, and let's make a sculpture of your matchbook collection. And your and our
I've been completely distracted by it because I've never actually bothered to look at them. And first of all, it's very good for the winter of discontent because I have a lot of stuff to burn. But like some of these designs are like super cool, and I'm asking myself what exactly was my mother up to? I mean, there are interesting. I could trace some very interesting, like, I didn't realize this was like a definitive example of like her second life as some sort of showgirl or something.
So anyway. we got to do this in acrylic. It could be a Simon Denny piece, and then we'll sell it where all Beanie Babies are sold on eBay, and watch everyone critique how we've ruined the Beanie Baby, and it's worth nothing. It'll go for like $3.
Done. And burn those.
Burn those.
You're muted as well.
No, but until she gets back. Simon, I've really enjoyed your stuff. But I'm still waiting for. Yeah, I would love to. I'm still waiting for my my little CryptoKitty miner.
Oh, yeah.
Did you gave it to Craig Wright, and then
I know, and then I told him that I wanted one. He goes, "I'll have to make one for you." And then I'm waiting, Isabella.
Yeah, done.
Anyway, Simon's got to go now, so it's been absolutely super fun.
Yeah, what a pleasure. What a great conversation.
I'm looking forward to all the pieces of art we've inspired, and then we can burn them with my matches.
I like it.
in the style of that project that you talked about at Vaudeville. I enjoyed that. So thank you so much, Simon. We'll see you soon, and thanks for being a friend of the Blind Spot. So take care.
Thank you very much.